There is something about death that almost nobody ever really thinks about. And I do not mean the dying part. I do not mean the hospitals, the grief, the gradual failing of the body. People think about that. That is the part that terrifies us. That we lie awake at 2 inches the morning dreading. That we spend enormous energy trying not to think about. I am not talking about that. I am talking about being dead. What it would actually be like. The state itself. Not the transition, not the approach, not the last breath. The condition of being fully, completely, permanently dead. Here, on Feynman's path, we think that is exactly the kind of question that deserves to be chased all the way down. Not because we want to make you anxious, quite the opposite. Because when you actually follow this question honestly, with the rigor of a physicist and the patience to not flinch away from where the logic leads, you end up somewhere that is very different from where you started. Somewhere that is, in its strange way, almost peaceful. So let us begin. When most people try to imagine being dead, a certain picture forms. And it is worth describing this picture carefully, because the picture has a flaw hiding inside it that almost nobody notices. The picture goes something like this. You imagine darkness. Total, absolute darkness. No light anywhere, not even the kind you can see when you close your eyes in a lit room. And then silence. Complete silence. No sounds, no voices, no ambient noise of a world continuing around you. And then underneath both of those, a sense of pure emptiness. Nothing. An infinite nothing stretching outward in all directions, with you floating in the middle of it, aware of the nothing, experiencing the absence of everything. That is the common picture. The void, the eternal darkness, the endless silence. And here is the problem with it. Look at what that picture requires. To experience that darkness, there has to be someone experiencing it. To feel that silence, there has to be something there to feel it. To be aware of the emptiness, there has to be awareness present. The picture smuggles in an observer. It imagines death as an experience that you have, rather than as the end of experience itself. And that assumption, the assumption that you will still be there to perceive whatever death is, might be the most consequential mistake we make when we think about this subject. Richard Feynman, the physicist whose relentless intellectual honesty we try to follow on this channel, had a habit of doing something very specific when confronted with a question. Before he would try to answer it, he would examine the question itself for hidden assumptions. He would ask, what are we taking for granted here? What have we smuggled in without realizing it? And very often he found that the assumptions buried inside a question were doing more work than the question itself, and that getting the assumptions right was more important than getting the answer right. So let us do that here. Let us look at what we are actually assuming when we imagine being dead. We are assuming that being dead is something that happens to us. Something we undergo, something that, in some sense, we will be present for. But is that assumption justified? Does the physics of how experience works actually support it? Let us start from the simplest possible place, the way Feynman always insisted on starting. What does it take for something to be experienced at all? Right now, as you are listening to this, your brain is doing something extraordinary. There are roughly 86 billion neurons in the human brain. And at this moment, vast networks of those neurons are firing in coordinated patterns. Electrical signals are racing along axons, crossing synapses, triggering chemical changes in the receiving neurons, which in turn fire and send their own signals along. And the process propagates through an incomprehensibly complex web of connections at speeds and in patterns that no current computer can come close to replicating. And out of that physical process, something emerges that is, philosophically speaking, one of the deepest mysteries in science: subjective experience. The feeling of being you, right now, listening, thinking, noticing that time is passing and you are here in it. That feeling of being present, of being a self that is having experiences, is not something that floats free of the physical process. It is not a separate thing that lives in the brain the way a ghost might live in a house, present but independent of the material structure. The experience is the physical process. The subjective feeling of being here and aware is what the firing of those neuronal networks feels like from the inside. This is not mysticism. This is not speculation. It is the working hypothesis of virtually every neuroscientist and cognitive scientist doing serious research on consciousness today. We do not fully understand how physical processes in the brain give rise to subjective experience. That remains one of the deepest unsolved problems in science. But the connection between the physical process and the experience is not in doubt. Every piece of evidence we have points in the same direction. Change the physical process, change the experience. Stop the physical process, stop the experience. You know this from the inside. When you go under general anesthesia, you do not experience a long, peaceful darkness. You experience nothing, and then you are awake again, with no sense of any time having passed at all. Not blackness, not silence, not emptiness. Nothing, in the most complete sense of the word, and then abruptly you are back. When you are in a truly dreamless sleep, not the kind where you later realize you were dreaming, but the kind of deep sleep where consciousness genuinely goes offline, you do not experience anything. You are not there. There is no darkness to observe, no silence to hear, no emptiness to float in. There is nothing that it is like to be you for those hours, because the physical processing that generates the what it is like has powered down. Now, hold that picture clearly, because we are about to take it somewhere important. What is death? At the level of physics and neuroscience. Death is the permanent cessation of those physical processes. The neurons stop firing. The electrochemical activity that maintained the patterns, that continuously updated the model of self and world that your brain was running, that generated the ongoing experience of being you, stops. Not temporarily, the way sleep or anesthesia is temporary. Permanently. The system does not restart. When that happens, what happens to experience? The logic is uncomfortably clear. If experience requires the physical process, and the physical process permanently ends, then experience permanently ends. There is no residual awareness floating in the absence of the process, because there was never any awareness that was separate from the process. The awareness was the process. When the process stops, the awareness does not migrate somewhere else. It does not have anywhere to go. It was not a thing that could go somewhere. It was a pattern of activity, and when the activity stops, the pattern is simply gone. This is the point where most conversations about death get uncomfortable and change the subject. But I want to stay with it a little longer, because the discomfort is pointing at something that is actually quite strange and interesting. If experience ends when the physical process ends, then the concept of being dead as a state you are in and aware of does not make physical sense. Being dead is not a state that you occupy. It is the absence of any occupation whatsoever. It is not like being in a dark room. A dark room still contains you. Death does not contain you, because there is no you to contain. The phrase "I am dead" would be, from the first-person perspective, literally incoherent. To say "I am dead," you would have to be present enough to say it. The moment you can say it, it is not true. And the moment it becomes true, you cannot say it. This is not wordplay. It is pointing at something real about the structure of experience and the structure of death that our ordinary language and our ordinary intuitions tend to obscure. Let me try to make this feel more concrete, because I think the abstract framing can make it easy to nod along without really letting it land. Imagine you are sitting in your car, stuck in traffic on the way home from work. Late afternoon. The radio is on, something you are half listening to. You are thinking about what to make for dinner, whether you need to stop at the grocery store, that conversation you had with someone today that has been replaying in your head. The light changes and you ease forward a few car lengths and stop again. At this moment, right now, in that ordinary traffic jam, your brain is running an extraordinary operation. It is taking light, bouncing off the car in front of you and turning it into the visual experience of a red sedan. It is taking pressure waves, hitting your eardrums and turning them into music and voices. It is retrieving memories and spinning them into that internal conversation that has been running all afternoon. It is generating the sense of you, sitting there, slightly impatient, present, alive. Every single element of what you are experiencing is a construction. Your brain is not passively receiving reality. It is actively building a model of reality, moment by moment, from the raw signals coming in through your senses, filtered through memory and expectation and the ongoing story it tells about who you are and where you are and what is happening. Feynman talked about this. Not in those exact terms, but he was deeply interested in what the difference was between how the world is and how the world seems. He understood that our experience is a representation, not a direct view. That the red you see is not redness out in the world, but a particular quality of experience your visual cortex creates in response to a certain range of wavelengths of electromagnetic radiation. That the sound of music is not something that exists in the air. The air just carries pressure waves, but something created by the auditory processing of your brain. The reality you experience is constructed continuously by physical processes inside your skull. Now, back to the traffic jam. Suppose that in that ordinary moment something happens. An aneurysm, let us say, or whatever physical event would be most complete and sudden. The brain activity that was maintaining all of that construction stops. What happens from the inside? Here is what does not happen. You do not see the world go dark. Darkness is something you see. Seeing requires visual processing. The processing has stopped. You do not hear silence. Silence is something you hear. Hearing requires auditory processing. That has stopped too. You do not feel an emptiness. Feeling emptiness requires a felt quality of experience. There is no longer any process to generate felt qualities. You do not transition to a different kind of experience. You do not float upward and see your body from above. You do not enter a warm light or a dark tunnel. You do not have one last thought that you then observe yourself having. You do not have a moment of sudden clarity where everything becomes comprehensible. All of those things, every one of them, would require that the physical process of experience generation continues. They are experiences. They require an experiencer. And the experiencer is not something separate from the physical process that has now stopped. The experiencer was the physical process. When it stops, there is no experiencer left to have any experience at all, including the experience of the process stopping. From the inside, from the perspective of the person whose brain has just permanently stopped, there is no inside anymore. There is not even darkness. There is not even nothing. There is not the absence of experience as something that can be noticed. There is just the end of the sequence. And here is where this gets genuinely strange, in a way that I think most people have not sat with long enough. If there is no experience of death, if you cannot experience being dead, then the question of what death is like from the inside is not a question that has an answer. It is not that the answer is very bad, or very peaceful, or very dark, or very empty. It is that the question itself does not apply. Death is not a state that is like anything from the inside, because there is no inside from which to assess what anything is like. You have never experienced not existing. Think about that for a moment. Before you were born, there was a period during which you did not exist. Long periods, in fact. 13.8 billion years of cosmic history before the particular combination of cells that became you came together. Did you experience that non-existence? Of course not. There was no you to experience it. The period before your birth is not something that is in your memory as a blank or as a darkness. It is not in your memory at all. It is simply absent. Death is the same from your perspective. The period after your death will not be something you experience as blankness. It will simply be absent, not dark, not empty, not long, just not there, from the only perspective that was ever relevant, which is yours. Feynman was asked about death in several interviews, and his approach to the question was characteristically direct. He said he thought about it and concluded that when you are dead, and there is not much more to be said about it from the inside. What he found interesting was not the state of being dead, but the question of how to relate to that fact while you are still alive. And that, I think, is exactly the right place to put the attention. But before we get there, I want to go one layer deeper into the physics, because there is something about the experience of time that adds another dimension to all of this that I think is crucial. Why does it feel like time is passing right now? You have a very strong, very immediate sense that the current moment is in motion, that it is flowing forward, that the now you occupied 1 second ago is different from the now you occupy currently, that there is a direction to experience, a sequence, a before and after. Where does that feeling come from? It comes from the continuous updating process of your brain. Your brain is not like a camera taking still photographs and stringing them together. It is running a continuous prediction and updating process. It is constantly generating expectations about what is about to happen, comparing incoming sensory data against those expectations, updating its model of the world and of itself, and generating new predictions. It is also continuously accessing and integrating memory, not like opening a file cabinet, but as an active reconstruction process that weaves together past experiences with current context. The sense that time is moving, that the current moment is different from the moment before, emerges from this ongoing comparison and updating. You know, time is passing because your brain is continuously noting the differences between what it expected and what arrived, between the state of the world 1 moment ago and the state of the world now. This is Feynman's kind of insight, not a mystical claim about the nature of time itself, but a very specific claim about where the experience of time actually comes from. It comes from the processing. Take away the processing. Take away the experienced flow of time, which means something striking about the experience of dying. Your last conscious moment will feel, from the inside, exactly like every other moment in your life. It will have the texture of ordinary experience. You will be aware of something, some specific percept or thought or sensation, and that awareness will have the normal feeling of being present in a flowing, ongoing, real moment. And then, from your perspective, there will simply be no next moment. Not a dramatic no next moment. Not a moment where you suddenly realize the next moment is not coming. Just the sequence ends. You will not have a moment in which you recognize that you are about to have no more moments. Because recognizing that would require a moment in which to do the recognizing, and that would itself be followed by more moments of recognition, and the logic quickly collapses into absurdity. The final moment does not announce itself as final. It cannot. If it did, it would not be final. Think about that in terms of what you actually know about your experience. Every moment of your life so far has been followed by another moment. The sequence has been unbroken. You have been inside an uninterrupted chain of experiences since you were first capable of having experiences, with only the interruptions of sleep and anesthesia that we talked about, and in those cases the chain picked up again afterward. Your last moment will be a link in that chain that happens not to be followed by another link. From the outside, from the perspective of the physics of the universe, this is a significant event. From the inside, from your perspective, it is simply the last in a series of moments that, at the time of their occurrence, felt exactly like all the others. Now, here is the natural next question, and I want to sit with it, because it is genuinely interesting and a little vertiginous. If my experience ends at some point, and then, from the outside, the universe continues, what does that mean for the universe? From your perspective, everything ends at your last moment. Your world, the entire constructed reality that your brain has been building and maintaining since the moment you became capable of experience, simply concludes. There is no you to witness what comes after. The earth does not grind to a halt. The sun does not dim. The city you lived in does not pause. People do not stop going to work, buying groceries, complaining about traffic, falling in love, arguing about things that probably do not matter, watching movies on a Sunday afternoon. All of that continues. It was always going to continue. The universe does not pause to mark the occasion. The physical processes of the cosmos are not calibrated to notice when a particular arrangement of neurons stops its activity. The laws of physics do not make exceptions, do not soften the continuity of everything else to accommodate the fact that one particular perspective has been extinguished. From the universe's point of view, if the universe can be said to have a point of view, what happened is simply that a local physical system underwent a phase transition. The organized, self-maintaining complexity of a living brain became a different kind of matter, gradually redistributed into the surrounding environment. The carbon and hydrogen and oxygen and nitrogen and trace minerals that made up the person did not vanish. Matter does not vanish. They were rearranged. They began participating in different chemical processes. They became over time part of other systems. This is Feynman's territory. He thought about physics in terms of systems, processes, flows of energy and information. And from that perspective, what we call death is simply the ending of a particular kind of organized process. The atoms continue. The energy continues. The organization that was specific to that person, that arrangement that was doing the particular kind of processing that generated that particular person's subjective experience, that organization does not continue. But the substrate does. There is something in this perspective that I want to examine carefully because it can cut in two very different directions emotionally, and I think it is worth being precise about which direction the physics actually points. On one reading, this is cold and bleak. Your subjective experience ends, the universe shrugs, everything goes on without you, and that is it. The materialist account of death sounds, to many people, like the most terrifying possible conclusion. All of this, everything you have ever known and felt and done, and then nothing. But I want to suggest that this reading, while understandable, is actually resting on a hidden assumption that the physics does not support. The hidden assumption is that the continuing universe is, in some sense, happening to you, that the endless continuation of everything, without you, is something you will be there to witness and find terrible. that the absence of your experience will be experienced as an absence. But we already established that this is incoherent. The absence of your experience cannot be experienced as an absence because experiencing requires experience, and your experience has ended. The terrifying vision of being absent from an ongoing universe that you used to be part of, that vision requires that you are still somehow present to find it terrifying. Take away the presence, and you take away the terror. What you actually face, from your own perspective, is not the endless cold universe without you. What you face is exactly what you face right now, the current moment, and then the next, and then the next. The endless universe without you is not something you will ever experience. It is not waiting for you on the other side of your last moment. There is no other side to your last moment from where you are standing. And here is the thing about your last moment, the thing I keep returning to because I think it is the most concretely useful fact in this entire conversation. Your last moment will be a moment, a real, textured, specific moment. You will be thinking about something, or hearing something, or seeing something. You will be you, fully, completely, in the way you always are in moments. And that moment will not announce itself as your last. It will feel like what it has always felt like to be here, in a moment, with more moments presumably coming. The difference between your last moment and the moment you are in right now is not experiential. You cannot tell, from the inside of a moment, whether it is your last. Your experience of your last moment will be no different in its fundamental quality of being a moment from your experience of the moment you had this morning when you were deciding what to have for breakfast, or the moment last week when you were surprised by something you read, or any of the thousands and thousands of ordinary, unremarkable moments that make up the texture of a life. Your last moment is not a special kind of moment. It is an ordinary moment that happens not to be followed by another. I find something almost relieving in that. Not in a forced, trying to make the best of it way, but genuinely. The thing I fear when I think about death, and I think about it, is the experience of it. The experience of loss, of ending, of absence. But the physics tells me that those experiences, those specific felt qualities of losing and ending and being absent, are not available after the final moment. They require experience to be had, and at that point, experience is over. What I am actually afraid of, when I examine it closely, is an experience that will not occur. Let me try to state this as clearly as I can, because I think the clarity is what makes it useful. You will not experience being dead. This is not a consoling metaphor. It is a straightforward consequence of what experience is. Experience is a physical process. When the physical process permanently ends, experience ends with it. There is no version of you that persists on the other side of that ending, experiencing the ending. The ending is not experienced by anyone, because there is no one left to do the experiencing. You will have a last moment. That moment will feel like a moment. And then there will be no next moment for you. And you will not experience there being no next moment, because the experiencing has ended. This is what Feynman would call the actual situation, stripped of the hidden assumptions we did not realize we were making. Not the comforting version, not the frightening version, but the accurate version. And in my experience, the accurate version turns out to be considerably less frightening than the version most people carry around. Now, a natural objection arises here, and I want to address it directly because I think it is important and because the answer takes us somewhere more interesting. Someone might say, all right, I accept that I will not experience being dead, but I will experience dying. The approach, the process, and that is what actually frightens me. And to that I would say yes, and that is a completely legitimate thing to take seriously, and it is a different question from the one we have been examining. Dying is a process that occurs while you are still alive, while the experiential system is still running. It can involve pain, confusion, fear, grief, the loss of faculties, the watching of life contracting. These are real concerns that physics does not dissolve. But notice what the question has become when we are clear about this. The question is no longer about death itself, about the state of being dead, the infinite dark void. That was the phantom we were chasing, the imagined experience of an inexperienceable state. The real question, the one with actual content, is about the process of dying, which is a part of life, not an encounter with death, and about the living of a life that will eventually end, and about what relationship to have with that fact right now. And that question, it turns out, is one that physics, in combination with the kind of clear thinking that Feynman exemplified, has some genuinely useful things to say about. Let me take you somewhere that I think makes this viscerally real in a way that pure logic cannot quite manage. Think about the people who have had near-death experiences, not the ones who report lights and tunnels and visions, though we will come back to those. Think about the much larger and less discussed group of people who have been clinically dead, whose hearts stopped and whose brains showed no measurable activity, who were successfully resuscitated, and who report nothing, no experience whatsoever. They were awake, and then they were awake again, with no sense of any interval having passed, no darkness remembered, no sensation of floating in void, just gone, and then back. This is actually the most common reported experience, or rather, non-experience among people who have been resuscitated. No tunnel, no light, no peace, no void. Simply nothing, and then the startling return of being present. And this makes complete sense given everything we have talked about. When the brain stops generating experience, there is nothing for the person to experience, including nothing to experience as an absence. The gap between going under and coming back is not experienced as a gap. It is simply not there, from the inside. The people who do report experiences during clinical death, the tunnels and lights and presences, are almost certainly reporting experiences generated by a brain in the process of shutting down, not a brain that has stopped. The brain under extreme physiological stress does extraordinary things. It generates intense experiences from minimal inputs. It may release neurochemicals that produce profound states of consciousness. The experience of a bright light and a feeling of peace and an altered sense of time and self are, from a neuroscience perspective, entirely plausible products of a brain in crisis. They are experiences, which means the brain was still generating experience when they occurred. That is not death. That is a very unusual and intense form of being alive. I am not dismissing these experiences. They are real experiences that people have, and they clearly have a profound effect on those who have them. But they are experiences of a process, not experiences of a state that comes after the process ends. Which brings me to something that I think is one of the most genuinely strange and interesting aspects of this entire question. We talked earlier about how your sense of time passing comes from the brain's continuous updating process. The felt flow of time, the sense that now is different from a moment ago, is a product of the brain doing its work. What would happen to your experience of time if that process slowed dramatically? If instead of updating dozens of times a second, the brain was updating much more slowly or in very different ways? There is some evidence from people who have survived extreme circumstances and from certain anesthetic states that the felt rate of time can change dramatically. That seconds can feel like long stretches when the brain is processing certain things in certain ways. We know that the brain does not have a fixed clock speed when it comes to experience. The felt duration of moments varies with attention, emotion, novelty, and other factors. And in a brain that is shutting down, the processing may be doing something we genuinely do not fully understand. The last electrical activity of a dying brain is not simply the smooth powering down of a computer. It is often a complex final surge of activity, different in character from normal brain function. What the person experiences, if anything, in those final seconds, we genuinely do not know. This is one of the places where intellectual honesty requires acknowledging the limits of current knowledge. Feynman was very clear about this, about the difference between what we know and what we do not know, and about the importance of not pretending to know things we do not know. What we do know is that whatever is experienced in those final moments is experienced by a still living brain, and that once the process is permanently over, there is nothing to experience and no one to experience it. Now let me take us to the perspective shift I have been building toward, because I think it changes something about how this all feels. We have established that you will never experience being dead, that the void, the darkness, the eternal silence are not waiting for you on the other side of life, because there is no other side of life from your perspective. From your perspective, there are only moments. And then, at some point, no more moments. But that no more moments is not itself experienced. The last moment is the last thing on your experiential ledger. After that, the ledger is closed, and there is no one to be bothered by the closing. But here is what is interesting. From the outside, from the perspective of the physical universe, you are never fully gone either. The matter that composed you, that did all the processing, those atoms do not disappear. Carbon atoms do not cease to exist when the brain they were part of stops working. They redistribute. They enter into different chemical arrangements. they become part of other systems. Some of those systems are other living organisms. Some are soil, air, water. Some end up in rocks, in oceans, in the atmosphere. Eventually, on geological timescales, they cycle through other forms. You are, in this sense, always in the process of becoming something else. Your whole life is a process of becoming something else. The matter in your body right now is not the same matter that was in your body 10 years ago. Your cells replace themselves. Your atoms cycle through you and out and are replaced by others. The you of 10 years ago and the you of now share a pattern, a continuity of organization and memory and identity, but not the same physical substrate. Death is, in this sense, the end of the pattern rather than the end of the matter. The organization that was doing the experiencing, the specific arrangement that was generating this particular person's particular subjective experience, that organization dissolves. But the matter and energy that were organized in that way simply enter into new organizations. They continue participating in the physical processes of the universe. You are, in a deep and literal sense, a temporary arrangement of matter that has always been on loan from the larger system. The atoms in your body have been in stars. They have been in other organisms. They have been in the air and the soil and the water. They were loaned to you, so to speak, for the duration, and when the duration ends, they are returned to the general pool and taken up into new arrangements. Feynman talked about this when he reflected on his own mortality, and he seemed to find it, if not comforting exactly, then at least intellectually satisfying. He felt that the honest view was simply more interesting than the alternatives, and that the honest view did not require the addition of anything beyond what the physics showed. What the physics shows is this: for the period of your life, you are a genuine novelty in the universe. The particular arrangement of matter that is you, with its specific history and memories and patterns of thought and experience, has never existed before and will never exist again. The universe contains this particular perspective, this particular way of being a center of experience, exactly once. The experiences you are having right now, the specific qualities of what it is like to be you in this moment, are genuinely unique events in the history of the cosmos. And when the physical process that generates those experiences ends, those specific experiences end, the universe does not get another copy, but neither does it simply swallow them into darkness. They were real, they occurred. They were part of what happened. The universe is, in some sense, the sum of everything that has occurred in it, and you are part of that sum. This is, I realize, a less emotionally satisfying picture than the alternatives. It does not promise reunion with the people you have loved. It does not promise that the good you did in your life has a cosmic accounting ledger where it is permanently stored. It does not promise anything beyond the life that is actually happening. But what it does do, if you sit with it long enough, is shift the weight. Instead of life being a brief, terrifying interlude before an eternity of nothingness, it becomes simply the only thing there is, from your perspective. The nothingness does not come after. It is not waiting. There is no eternity of absence stretching out ahead of your death that you will have to somehow endure. There is only this, the moments, the sequence of experiences that you are having and will have, for whatever duration you have to have them. And here is where the logic, if you have been following it all the way through, does something unexpected. It does not leave you in a cold, bleak place. It brings you somewhere that feels, at least to me, considerably warmer than where we started. We started with the void, the picture of death as infinite darkness, endless silence, eternal emptiness, the common image that most people carry around when they think about their own mortality. The thing that makes death feel like the ultimate loss, the subtraction of everything, the final defeat. And what we have found, following the physics carefully, is that the void is a fiction. Not in the sense that there is something on the other side, some afterlife or continuation, but in the sense that the void, as an experience, as something you will encounter and have to endure, is not there. The infinite dark is not waiting for you. The eternal silence is not your future. There is no vast emptiness that you will eventually find yourself alone in. There is only the life you are in the middle of right now. Think about what that actually means in practical terms. The fear of death, when you chase it all the way down to what you are actually afraid of, often turns out to be a fear of a specific kind of experience. A fear of the moment of transition, of realizing it is ending. A fear of what it will feel like to no longer be. And underneath all of that, often, a fear of the long, empty after. The forever of not being. But the transition, as we have discussed, does not have a moment where you realize it is happening. The ending does not announce itself. The last moment will feel like a moment, with no special quality of finality attached to it. And the long empty after is not something you will experience, because experiencing requires you to be present, and you will not be present. What you are left with, when all of that is cleared away, is the actual shape of your situation. You have a life. You do not know how long it is. You are in it right now. Every moment of it has the quality of being a moment, the particular texture of being here and aware and present. And all of those moments are, from your perspective, what there is. The way this changes things, for me at least, is in where the attention naturally goes. If the thing I thought I was afraid of, the endless void, the eternal absence, is not actually there, then what am I doing spending my current moments anticipating it? The time I spend dreading a future emptiness is time I am taking away from the present fullness. And the future emptiness, as we have established, will never be experienced by me as emptiness, because I will not be there to experience it. The moments I do not spend in anxious anticipation of the void are simply more moments of being alive, more links in the chain of experience, more of the only thing there is, from where I am standing. Feynman arrived at something like this. In the last years of his life, when he was dealing with cancer and the knowledge that he did not have much time left, people who knew him described him as remarkably not focused on death. Not in a denial way, not in a forced positivity way, simply genuinely interested in the life he was still in, curious about problems, engaged with the people around him, savoring the experience of being a mind that could still engage with interesting questions. He said at one point in an interview late in his life that he thought people spent too much time worrying about dying and not enough time noticing they were alive. The precise phrasing varies in different accounts, but the spirit of it was consistent. He had looked at the physics of the situation and arrived at a conclusion that was, paradoxically, life-affirming. Not because the physics offered false comfort, but because the honest account of what death is turned out to be less terrible than the imagined account. The imagined death is terrifying. The void, the darkness, the endless absence, the you that persists after death, trapped in nothingness, aware of everything it has lost. The actual death, as described by the physics, does not contain a you that persists after death, does not contain awareness of loss, does not contain the experience of being absent. It is simply the end of the sequence. And the end of a sequence is not, in itself, a tragedy. Every good book ends. Every piece of music ends. Every conversation ends. The ending does not retroactively unmake the thing that preceded it. The ending does not cancel the reality of what occurred. Your life, when it ends, will have occurred. The experiences you had were real. The moments of genuine connection with other people were real. The times you understood something for the first time were real. The ordinary Tuesday afternoons and the extraordinary moments and every gradation between them were real. They were events that happened in this universe. The universe contains them. In whatever sense the universe can be said to contain anything. The ending does not erase them, and the ending will not be experienced by you as an ending. From the inside, the last moment of your life will be a moment of your life. You will be there, in it, fully, and then the sequence will stop, and there will be no you left to experience the stopping as a loss, because the you that could experience things is precisely what has ended. You are not moving toward an experience of absence. You are moving through a sequence of presence. That is the honest account. That is what the physics actually tells us, stripped of both the false comfort of imagined afterlives and the false terror of imagined voids. Neither the paradise nor the darkness. Just the life, all the way to the end of it, and then nothing for you, because there is no you for whom there is a nothing. I have been sitting with this for a while now, and I find that it does something. Not an immediate, dramatic transformation of how I feel about mortality, but a slow shift in where the weight sits. The weight used to sit in the future, in the anticipation of what is coming, the loss that is approaching, the void at the end. Now, when I examine that future honestly, I find that the void is not there, or rather, that it is there, but that it has nothing to do with me. The universe will continue without me, and that is fine, and it has nothing to do with me, because I will not be there to find it fine or not fine. And somehow, with the future lightened of that particular burden, the present gets heavier. In a good way, more substantial, more worth being in. This may be what Feynman was pointing at, not a discovery that makes death less real, but a clear examination that makes the fear of death less real. And with the fear diminished, the life becomes more vivid, more worth attending to, more interesting. Which is, in the end, perhaps the most Feynman-like conclusion available. Not comfort drawn from wishful thinking, but clarity drawn from honest looking, and the unexpected discovery that the honest view is more livable than the imagined one. The moments you are having are the only moments there are from where you stand. The sequence of experience that is your life is a genuine novelty, a specific perspective that exists in this universe exactly once. The end of that sequence will not be experienced by you as an end, and the time you spend not worrying about that end is more time inside the sequence, more time inside the life, more moments of the only thing there is. That is, I think, both the most accurate thing the physics has to tell us about death and the most useful. If something in today's conversation has shifted something, however slightly, in how you relate to this particular subject, I would love to know. These are exactly the kinds of questions we come back to, circle around from different angles, deepen over time. That is what this channel exists for. Thank you for spending this time with me. Of all the things you could have been present for today, you chose this, and that means something. Take care of yourselves, and I will see you in the next one.